So tonight is Daniel chapter 3, and some of us probably are familiar with this story. This is the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. Some of us we learned this story as kids in Sunday school. So um, at any rate, there's a good message in this story. And so let me just get right into it, and we'll start with verse 1. And here we have King Nebuchadnezzar. He's gonna create, or he's gonna erect a statue or an image, and he wants everyone to worship him or worship it, the image. And it's somewhat familiar to uh, the tribulation period, where the Antichrist is going to uh, cause people to bow down and worship his image also. So, at any rate, verse 1 says, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and its width was six cubits. And he set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. So there's some considerable debate regarding when this happened. Some think it's a short time after the events of Daniel 2, which we read last week. Others think it's many years later. But there is a discernible link between Nebuchadnezzar's dream in Daniel 2 and the image he made in here in Daniel 3. Excuse me. And it seems that I'm going to lose my voice already. I just started. It seems that Nebuchadnezzar deliberately made this entire statue of gold to say that the day of his reign and authority would never end, and in contradiction to God's declared plan. So this image, or rather it's a statue, was 60 cubits by 6 cubits. So cubit, I believe, is roughly about 18 inches. 60 cubits would be roughly about 90 feet. So 90 feet tall by 6 cubits, 9 feet wide. So being so large, it's safe to say that it's not made of solid gold, but probably wood that's overlaid with gold. And this is was a common method of construction in the ancient world. So it says, on the plains of Dura, there stands today a mound, which is about 20 feet high and an exact square of about 46 feet at the base, resembling the pedestal of a colossal statue. So they believe that they found, or this mound is the base for this statue that was created. Moving on to verse 2. King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather together the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces, to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered together for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So here they gather together. The word satrap it's a Persian word that means protector of the realm. So it refers to a specific category of public official, such as a governor or something along those lines. So all the officials and the provinces come to the dedication of this image. The demand that all come to the dedication ceremony means that Nebuchadnezzar meant to use the worship of this image as a test of his allegiance. Moving on, verse 4. Then a herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So here we have some musical instruments. Some of these musical instruments are difficult to define precisely, but the idea is still clear that it's an impressive orchestra. The use of the word Aramaic words for lyre, psaltery, and symphony has led some critics to say that the book of Daniel was written hundreds of years after the time of Daniel. So there's a lot of critics with this book in particular. They say this because the particular words are in Aramaic. They're borrowed from Greek words, which supposedly Daniel did not have these words at his disposal in the 6th century BC. And they supposedly did not come into Hebrew vocabulary until the 3rd century BC. But to clarify, nevertheless, ancient records tell that there were Greeks in the region of Assyria, Babylon, and Persia as far back as the 8th century. And archaeology also proves beyond a doubt that Greek mercenaries fought and made military settlements in and around Judea before the time of Daniel. So he says, whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So the command is backed up by a powerful threat. Nebuchadnezzar regarded the refusal to worship the image as treason, and not only as a religious offense. In this, Nebuchadnezzar was just like many other politicians who seem willing to use religion to strengthen their grip on political power. And so politicians are happy to blend together spiritual allegiance and national allegiance. And we have, some examples where it'd be like Nazi Germany. The head of the Hitler Youth Program for Nazi Germany, the guy who headed the Nazi Youth Program, said, if we act as true Germans, we act according to the laws of God. Whoever serves Adolf Hitler, the Fuhrer, serves Germany, and whoever serves Germany serves God. So there's that kind of religious aspect to it. They make them as gods. Another example comes in 1960, when the president of Ghana had slightly larger than life-size statue of himself erected in front of the National House of Parliament. An inscription on the side of the statue read, "Seek ye first the political kingdom, and all other things shall be added unto you." Total heresy. The statue was destroyed after a bloodless coup in 1966. So we have a fiery furnace, so a burning fiery furnace. Nebuchadnezzar is not a man who allowed lawbreakers to go unpunished. And in an ancient cuneiform writing, Nebuchadnezzar was described as so devoted to justice that he did not rest day or night. The document also tells of a criminal guilty of second offense who was decapitated, and afterwards a stone image of his head was displayed as a warning to others. So moving on, verse 7, we see this crowd of people is going to obey Nebuchadnezzar's command. So verse 7, so at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, flute, harp, and lyre in symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So when they hear this sound, Nebuchadnezzar's grand idolatry was accompanied by music, elaborate and well-produced music. This kind of reminds us of the inherent, we have a great power, inherent power in music. For both, it could be used for both good and evil. There's a special power in music that it can bring us before the throne of God in worship, or it could be used to seduce our minds for Satan's cause. So music is very powerful. So they fell down and worshiped this gold image, and this literally reads, as soon as they were hearing, they were falling down. And there's total and immediate obedience to Nebuchadnezzar's command. So now we have these Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They refuse to worship. So verse 8, so therefore at that time certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews, and they spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, harp, the lyre, and the psaltery and symphony with all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the gold image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So there are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up. So here we have certain Chaldeans, and these are soothsayers, as we learned last week. They come forward and they accuse. So these Chaldeans had an obvious political motivation against the Jews who were promoted to a high office along with Daniel in the events recorded in the previous chapter, chapter 2. Seems like they may have been jealous, or there may have been some jealousy here. So they say they do not serve your gods or worship the gold image. Apparently, their failure to worship the image was not discovered until these certain Chaldeans made it known. With so many thousands of government officials in attendance, it would be easy to overlook these three. Additionally, we see that this from this that the three Jewish men did not lodge a formal protest. They simply refrained from sharing in the sin of idolatry themselves. So their actions were not public, but neither were they hidden. And these these three Hebrew men must have known that they would be discovered, and yet they obeyed God rather than man. You will not be able to go through life without being discovered. A lighted candle cannot be hid. So if we stand for God, it will be made known. Our light will shine. So Nebuchadnezzar, he's going to interview these guys now. Verse 13, Nebuchadnezzar in rage and fury gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so they brought these men before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up? Now, if you are ready at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery and symphony with all kinds of music, and you fall down and worship the image which I have made, good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? So to his credit, Nebuchadnezzar did not accept the accusation on hearsay. He made sure of it with a personal interview. And this was even greater test for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It is one thing to make a stand for God. It is a greater thing to stick to your stand when pointedly asked, is it true? Peter followed Jesus after his arrest, but he wilted and denied Jesus when asked, is it true? He even denied Christ with a curse. So Nebuchadnezzar would not tolerate losing face on such an important occasion. His pride made him declare, you shall have no other gods than me. So we can imagine the enormous pressure on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to compromise. Everything in front of them, the king, the furnace, the music, their compatriots, their competitors, all of it conspired to convince them to compromise. Yet God was more real to them than any of those things. Charles Spurgeon, he says, "Do not judge the situation by the king's threat and by the heat of a burning furnace or the burning fiery furnace, but by the everlasting God and the eternal life which awaits you. Let not flute, harp, and sackbut," which is anybody know what a sackbut is? It's a trombone. So don't let that fascinate you, but hearken to the music of the glorified men, uh, of the glorified. Men frown at you, but you can see God smiling on you, and so you are not moved. So Nebuchadnezzar says, "Who is this God? Who is the God who will deliver you from my hands?" He thought that nothing of insulting the gods or all gods with his statement, and he is even more of a secularist or humanist than a theist. The God he really believes in is himself and not the gods of Babylon. So Shadrach, Meshach, verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up." So here they say, "We have no need to answer you." They had no need to defend themselves. Their guilt in the matter is clear, and they clearly would not bow down to this image. Our God is able to serve, or whom we serve is able to deliver us. So in this, the Jewish men showed a good understanding and appreciation of God's great power. In fact, they knew that God was able to save them from both the burning fiery furnace and from the hand of Nebuchadnezzar himself. But they say, but if not, in this, they show that they had good understanding and appreciation of the submission to God. They knew God's power, but they also knew that they must do what was right, even if God did not do what they expect or hoped him to do. So we often complain about our rights and what is fair, and often it is better to make a stand and endure our difficulty, leaving our fate in God's hands. They did not doubt God's ability, but neither did they presume to know God's will. And in this, they agreed with Job. And Job said, he quotes, or is quoted, "Though he slay me, yet I will trust him." That's in Job 13:15. They recognize that God's plan might be different than their desires. And I have my own desires and dreams, and I pray that God fulfills them. But if he doesn't, I can't turn my back on him. These were men who did not love too much. There are popular self-help books that hope to help people who seem to love too much. Yet many Christians are hindered because they love too much. And remember that early Christians were not thrown to the lions because they worshiped Jesus, but because they would not worship the emperor. So in our day, many do love Jesus and think highly of him, yet they are far from God because they also love and worship the world. They worship the world, sin, and self, hedonism. So do not love the world or the things of the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. 1 John 2:15 says. So it said, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image that you have set up. So it took great faith to say this. God had brought them to this place of great faith by preparing them with tests in less dramatic areas. These men stood firm when challenged to eat the impure foods. They saw God bless their obedience. That gave them the courage to obey now when the stakes were much higher. So remember last week, I believe they did not eat the king's food. So Many fail in their obedience because they wait for something big to test their faith before they really start to obey God. Some fill their life with many small compromises, yet tell themselves that they will stand firm when it really matters. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego show us that obedience to God in small things is what really matters. So the statement, so let it be known to you, O King, the statement of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is also remarkable for what it does not have, which is any hint of an excuse. In a time of testing like this, it's easy to think of 1,000 excuses that seem to justify compromise. And they might have said, "There's nothing to gain by resisting. Wouldn't we do good by living?" It is easy to say we must live, but in reality, we all must die. So why not die making a stand for God? And they might have said, "We are in a different place. In Rome, do as the Romans do." Yet they knew that God has unlimited jurisdiction, and we must do more than perform acts of religious obedience when we have an audience. And they might have said, "We will lose our jobs and our standard of living." Often when God blesses us, we make the blessing an idol and compromise. We compromise God to keep what we have. I know that to be true, or had been true in my life in the past. They might have said, "After all, we are not being called to renounce our God." They did not have a type of a conscience that said, "We are not bowing down to the idol, but only bowing down in respect to the king or in honor of the music." And excuses like this are common, but prove the principle that anything will serve as an excuse when the heart is bent on compromise. They might have said, "Everybody else is doing it." Instead, they cultivated brave personalities, willing to stand alone with God. They might have said, "It is only for once and not for very long, 10 minutes just for the king." And it is stupid to throw our lives away for 10 minutes. These men knew that 10 minutes could change an entire life, and 10 minutes can chart the course of your or for your eternity. They might have said, "This is more than can be expected of us. God will understand just this once." And it's true that God understands our struggle with sin. That is why he loves the sinner and made provision at the cross for freedom from the penalty, power, and the presence of sin. Knowing that God understands should be a spur to obedience and not a license to sin. So next we're going to go to the next section where they're going to be thrown into the fiery furnace. So verse 19, then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And he spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. And then these men were bound, in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed, on to my next page, killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the fiery furnace. So these guys died who threw them. They were burned. So here we see Nebuchadnezzar's full of fury. His countenance changes. No matter how brave these guys were, facing the fury of the king was extremely intimidating. And we get the feeling that prior to this statement, Nebuchadnezzar possibly spoke kindly, almost in a fatherly manner, to these wayward boys. After hearing their bold challenge, the expression of his face changed. So despite the intense intimidation, the men stayed courageous in their confession of faith. It says they're bound in their coats in the furnace exceedingly hot. So everything was done to make sure that the three Hebrew men were quickly and completely burned. So here next we see verse 24. Then King Nebuchadnezzar, was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" And they answered and said to the king, "True, O king, look." "Oh, true, O king." And he said, "Look," he answered, "I see 4 men loose and walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the form of the 4th was like the Son of God." So here King Nebuchadnezzar is astonished. It's astonishing that anyone survived for a moment inside the furnace when others perished at the door. The Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew of the Old Testament that was used by the early church. So the Septuagint says in Daniel 3:24 that his attention, or Nebuchadnezzar's attention, was caught when he heard the men singing praises in the furnace. And we can imagine that the king had had them cast into the furnace and didn't intend to look twice, believing they would be immediately consumed. As he walked away with a satisfied look on his face, he was immediately stopped by the sound of singing coming from the furnace. And at a safe distance from the raging heat, he peered inside and saw 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire. So if this singing in the furnace is true, it reminds us of Paul and Silas singing in the Philippian jail in Acts 16. So he said, I see 4 men loose, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. So Nebuchadnezzar here, he tells us who the 4th person was, the Son of God. And Jesus was literally with them in the worst of their trial. So we don't know if Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego knew that the Son of God was with them in their fiery trial. Sometimes we're aware of Jesus' presence in our trials, and sometimes we're not. But he is there nonetheless. Charles Spurgeon observed that God's people are often in the furnace, and though there are different kinds of furnaces, they serve similar purposes in our life. So there's a furnace that man prepares, and then there's the furnace that Satan prepares, and there's also a furnace that God prepares. And God can deliver us from a trial, or he can miraculously sustain and strengthen us in trial. He says, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire. So Nebuchadnezzar also observes that the 4 men were free in the fire, and that the fire only burnt the ropes that bound them. So next, verse 26. Let's see. Verse 26, we see the Hebrew men leave the furnace unharmed. So then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. And then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire, and the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the kings, the counselors gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire was not on them. So here we have these servants of the Most High God. Before they were out of the furnace, we say that Nebuchadnezzar has recognized that these men served a true God, or served the true God and the Most High God. The trial had no power over these men because they were thoroughly submitted to the power and the will of God. Before the time of Jesus, they knew the truth of Jesus, or of Jesus' promise. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. John 16:33. The smell of the fire was not on them, and this demonstrates how complete their deliverance was. This whole account illustrates perhaps serving as a type of the future of Israel during the Great Tribulation, also known as Daniel's 70th week, or the time of Jacob's trouble. Nebuchadnezzar is like the Antichrist. So, and this is typology, he's like the Antichrist who forces the whole world into one religion of idolatry. Nebuchadnezzar's image is like the image described in Revelation 13, if you were with us for that, that the whole world will be commanded to worship. The fiery furnace is like the Great Tribulation, which will be great affliction for the Jews. The three Hebrew men are like Israel, who will be preserved through the tribulation. The executioners who perished are like those in league with the Antichrist, who Jesus will slay at his return. And the mysteriously absent Daniel, he's like the church. He's not even present for the time of the Great Tribulation. So there you have a typology of the coming tribulation. And with Daniel not being present, that shows that the church will not be there either for the Great Tribulation. Next, we're going to get into the aftermath. And so we'll see here, Nebuchadnezzar is going to acknowledge the greatness of God and these three Hebrew men. So Nebuchadnezzar, verse 28, spoke, saying, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. And they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God." So here we see Nebuchadnezzar gives glory, or gave glory to God. He recognized that this great God is not his God, but he was still the God of these three brave men. The angel, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. So in Daniel 3:15, Nebuchadnezzar asked, "Who is a God, or who is the God who will deliver you from my hands?" And now Nebuchadnezzar knows a great deal more about this God. He is the God of the Hebrews, the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He is a God who sends a Savior, who sent his angel, which is Jesus. He is the God of great power, who delivered his servants. He is the God of worthy of trust, who trusted in him. He is the God worthy of full surrender, frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies. He is the God who demands exclusive allegiance, that they should not serve nor worship any God except their own God. Nebuchadnezzar knew a lot about God, but he did not yet know him personally. We will see that change as we continue on later. They yielded their bodies. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego surrendered themselves completely to God, body, soul, and spirit. And it was the kind of submission Paul wrote of in Romans 12, verse 1, where he says, "Present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service." And this whole account is a powerful illustration of the principle of Romans 12:1. We see Satan trying to make the believer bow down to his idealized image of what men and women should be. Christians must resist this with everything they have and pursue God's ideal. And in this, we will fulfill Romans 12:2, which says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Okay, verse 29. So this is great now. So we see Nebuchadnezzar, he's going to make a proclamation that nothing evil should be said against the God of the Hebrews. So they went from standing in his face to in him saying what God could save you, to now he's saying anyone should not speak against God of the God of the Hebrews, or evil against the God of the Hebrews. So verse 29 through 30, these are our last two verses of this chapter. So he says, therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. And then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. I wonder, because they were already promoted before, so now they're going to be promoted. I take it even higher. So he says, therefore I make a decree. The three Hebrew men did not ask for Nebuchadnezzar to make this decree, and they probably did not want him to. Coerced worship isn't good, and either towards an idol or towards a true God. There is no other God who can deliver like this. So seeing God at work in the life of his people was an extremely effective testimony to Nebuchadnezzar. Paul expressed the same idea in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 2, where he says, you are our epistle written in our hearts, known and read by all men. And clearly you are an epistle of Christ, ministered by us, written not with ink, but by the Spirit of the living God, not on the tablets of stone, but on tablets of flesh, that is, of the heart. So meaning our lives, sometimes our lives are the first Bible that many people will read. So it's a testimony to the world to live for Christ. And like I said, people will be looking at us through trials, and when they see us go through trials, they want to see how's this Christian person going to react through trials. And so a lot of times this will be the first Bible, our witness is the first Bible that folks will see. And so anyway, so that concludes the chapter 3 of Daniel.